Living at the extremes creates unnecessary struggle and oscillation. True power and freedom come from resting in the balanced center without pushing toward one end or the other. This insight, drawn from ancient Taoist wisdom and beautifully explored by Michael Singer in The Untethered Soul, offers a practical guide for navigating life with greater ease and inner freedom. Central to this teaching lies the principle of yin and yang, complementary opposites that exist in everything: light and dark, expansion and contraction, doing and not doing, or pleasure and pain. But yin and yang are not just two separate opposites standing apart. They are interdependent and interconnected. Each side contains the seed of the other inside it. That is what the small dot in the classic yin-yang symbol shows. Yang, which represents light, active, or expanding, already contains a bit of yin, rest, stillness, or contraction. Yin also already contains a bit of yang within it. This means that every extreme carries the beginning of its opposite. Excessive confidence often hides insecurity underneath it. Extreme control produces hidden exhaustion. Intense attachment carries fear of loss from the very beginning. We human beings usually notice only the visible surface of our behavior, yet beneath every extreme position there is already pressure building in the opposite direction. Singer uses the image of a pendulum to make this idea vivid and psychologically clear. Imagine a pendulum swinging freely. If you pull it far to one side and release it, it will swing with equal force toward the opposite side. The farther you pull it, the more violent the return swing becomes. In human life, the same thing happens internally. When the mind pushes aggressively toward one extreme, like constant productivity, rigid positivity, emotional suppression, total control, or extreme independence, it is resisting the natural balance contained within yin and yang itself. Since the opposite side was never eliminated, only suppressed, pressure slowly accumulates beneath the surface. Eventually, the system corrects itself. The harder the initial pull, the stronger the return swing becomes. This is why so many of us feel trapped inside exhausting cycles we cannot fully explain. We believe the problem is inconsistency, lack of discipline, emotional weakness, or bad luck, when often the deeper issue is the extreme itself. The mind keeps trying to solve imbalance by moving harder toward another imbalance. A person may decide that strict discipline is the answer to a chaotic life. At first, the change genuinely helps. They wake up earlier, organize their routines, remove distractions, and become more focused. The structure creates clarity. Clarity creates momentum. Because the results initially feel empowering, they begin tightening further. Rest starts feeling unproductive, free time feels irresponsible, and every moment now has to justify itself through achievement. What began as healthy structure slowly turns into psychological pressure. The body obeys for a while, but strain quietly accumulates underneath the performance. Fatigue increases, small interruptions create disproportionate frustration, and even motivation becomes dependent on pressure instead of genuine engagement. Then, eventually, the suppressed side returns. The same person who once controlled every detail suddenly wants distance from all structure. Responsibilities feel heavy, and discipline collapses into avoidance, procrastination, distraction, or emotional numbness. Most people interpret this as failure. But in reality, the collapse was already contained inside the original extreme. The problem was never discipline itself. Discipline becomes destructive only when it is pushed so far that the nervous system experiences life as constant tension. The middle way does not reject structure. It removes the unnecessary force hidden inside excessive control. A balanced person can work seriously without turning productivity into identity. They can rest without guilt because rest is understood as part of intelligent functioning rather than weakness. The same law appears even more clearly in emotional life because emotions become distorted whenever they are resisted aggressively. Many people spend years trying to avoid sadness, uncertainty, loneliness, anger, or fear. They force themselves to remain positive by reinterpreting every painful experience immediately or distracting themselves whenever uncomfortable feelings arise. Yet suppressing emotion requires continuous energy. The mind must constantly monitor itself, filtering what is acceptable and pushing away what feels threatening. Eventually, the pressure surfaces anyway. Sometimes it appears as anxiety, sometimes exhaustion, sometimes emotional numbness so deep that a person no longer understands what they genuinely feel anymore. The individual who spent years insisting they were fine suddenly realizes they have become disconnected from themselves entirely. The opposite extreme creates suffering too. Some people become deeply identified with pain instead of suppressing it. Every disappointment reinforces bitterness, hopelessness, or mistrust. Emotional wounds are replayed repeatedly because remaining guarded feels safer than vulnerability. Yet this also exhausts the mind. We human beings cannot remain in perpetual emotional defense forever. The center is different from both positions. In the balanced center, emotions are neither denied nor worshipped. Sadness can exist without becoming identity. Fear can arise without controlling every decision. Anger can pass through without automatically becoming destructive action. Emotional movement still exists because human life naturally moves, but the oscillation becomes less violent once resistance decreases. Relationships reveal this same pattern. Someone who fears abandonment may cling tightly to connection, constantly seeking reassurance, attention, or certainty from another person. At first, this intensity can look like love, but gradually the pressure becomes difficult to carry. The more tightly one person grasps, the more the relationship loses its natural rhythm. Then the pendulum swings, and distance appears where closeness once existed. Another person moves toward the opposite extreme. Instead of clinging, they emotionally withdraw. They convince themselves dependence is weakness and begin protecting themselves through detachment. Vulnerability feels dangerous, so they minimize attachment altogether. Yet beneath the appearance of strength, isolation, another form of suffering, develops. Again, the extreme creates the conditions for its opposite. The balanced center allows closeness without desperation and independence without emotional exile. There is connection, but there is also space. Care exists without possession. Love no longer becomes an attempt to force certainty out of another human being. Modern culture intensifies these pendulum swings constantly. Social media especially rewards extremes because intensity captures attention more easily than balance does. One person glorifies endless productivity. Another promotes emotional detachment. Others push extreme self-improvement, extreme positivity, extreme discipline, or extreme independence. Everything becomes intensified because intensity appears powerful from the outside. But intensity and balance are not the same thing. Many people living at these extremes appear stable publicly while privately feeling exhausted, anxious, emotionally fragmented, or deeply disconnected from themselves. The nervous system eventually reacts to prolonged imbalance, regardless of how successful the performance appears externally. We human beings are built around rhythm. The heart contracts and relaxes. Breathing expands and releases. Muscles grow through cycles of stress and recovery. Even nature itself moves through balance, day into night, winter into spring, movement into stillness. Yet psychologically, many people attempt to remain permanently activated. They treat rest as laziness, silence as unproductive, and stillness as wasted time. The body eventually protests. Attention weakens. Irritability increases. Motivation deteriorates. Anxiety rises. Some continue forcing themselves forward until numbness replaces genuine feeling entirely. Then they wonder why life feels empty. That emptiness often comes from living too far from center for too long. That is why we human beings must strive to walk the middle way. In Buddhism, the middle way is the path that avoids two extremes of indulgence in sensory pleasure and self-mortification. The Buddha discovered that neither chasing comfort nor punishing the body leads to liberation. Instead, the middle way is a living balance, moderation, awareness, and the Noble Eightfold Path, where you neither suppress life nor cling to it. In Taoism, this can be interpreted as resting in the dynamic center between yin and yang, because excess on either side creates imbalance, and true power flows from effortless alignment with the natural rhythm of life. To walk the middle way, a person must first notice the moment an inner movement begins pulling too strongly toward one side, the urge to over-control, the need to prove worth constantly, the impulse to escape discomfort immediately, or the craving for certainty where certainty does not exist. Instead of feeding the movement automatically, they should pause to create space between awareness and reaction. In doing so, thoughts will still appear, emotions will still move, desires will still arise, but less additional force will be added to the pendulum. Gradually, the nervous system will learn that not every discomfort must be escaped, not every thought deserves belief, and not every emotion requires immediate action. Over time, life begins feeling less exhausting internally. Work becomes steadier because it is no longer driven entirely by fear or identity. Relationships become healthier because unresolved emotional extremes are no longer constantly spilling into them. Decisions become clearer because perception is less distorted by reactivity. Most importantly, a person begins discovering a quieter form of strength. Not the strength created by force, but the strength that appears when inner conflict decreases. Life still contains uncertainty, ambition, pleasure, disappointment, beauty, loss, and change. The middle way does not remove these realities. It changes the way they are met. A centered person can move intensely when intensity is required and rest fully when rest is needed. They are not trapped at either pole. Success no longer becomes intoxicating. Failure no longer becomes annihilating. This may be the deepest insight hidden inside both yin and yang and the image of the pendulum itself. The movement continues. Awareness remains. Thoughts swing. Emotions swing. Circumstances swing. Identity itself changes over time. Yet beneath all movement, there is the possibility of a steadier presence that does not need to be thrown violently from side to side by every changing condition. Real freedom begins there, not in eliminating opposites, but in no longer being psychologically imprisoned by them. Thank you for watching. If this reflection resonated with you, or if you have experienced these pendulum swings in your own life, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found value in this video, consider leaving a like and subscribing for more explorations into psychology, philosophy, inner balance, and conscious living. Until next time, stay aware and keep returning to center.